How's it going, creeps? Welcome to episode 5 of Cinema Creep, a Black Mass Films podcast where we dissect all things vile, disgusting, and downright terrifying in the world of horror cinema. As always, our sponsor, Everblack Coffee. Go to everblackcoffee.com and pick up a bag for yourself. It is ethically sourced, premium quality coffee with a macabre twist, and it is deliciously dark. So, everblackcoffee.com. And of course, I am one of your hosts, Justin James, and I am joined by none other than Andrew Henderson himself. So, how are you doing this week? It has been a crazy one.
I'm doing fine, guys. Couldn't be any better. Yeah, it has been a crazy week. So last week we missed an episode, and I hate that we already missed an episode 5, guys. But I will take fault for that one. I had a tree fall on my house. Trees are just deciding to commit suicide in my neighborhood, and I have this massive oak tree, Justin. You've seen it in my front yard, and a branch that is the size of normal trees in other yards decided it was going to break off and shave off the front side of my porch on my house. So I've been dealing with that. You know, if you guys have ever had anything like this happen or had to deal with insurance, you know, it's a lot of stress, a lot of headaches. But yeah, we're moving forward and we're back. So I'm decent.
And it sucks too, because didn't you say you're going to have to cut that whole tree down?
Yes. So this tree, guys, is probably, I don't know, 60 to 100 years old. Massive.
It's a sick fucking tree, though.
Yeah, it's a staple of the neighborhood. And even the neighbors are sad that we're probably going to have to get rid of the tree. And we got to get rid of it because the tree guys came out that did all the removal. And we have this huge, massive hole where the branch broke off of. And you can see into the tree. And they're like, yeah, your tree's rotted from the inside out. And it's probably because of carpenter ants. And then water got in the holes made by the carpenter ants. Yeah, right. And your tree's rotted. So most likely it's going to have to come down. And either that or you're going to just keep having these limbs break off. And my tree's so big it's growing across the road over the neighbor's yard. So it's becoming not only a safety issue for my family, but for other families as well. So
that could also be a lawsuit for you.
Right. And, I can't be putting other people in danger because of this tree. So
got to do what you got to do. Sucks, though, because guys, literally, anytime I've ever been over to Andrew's, like, as soon as you pull into even remotely the neighborhood, like, the only thing you see is this tree towering over everything. It's like the guardian of the neighborhood. But so crazy week. Then after we failed to record the podcast the first night because some technical difficulties for the second week in a row, but this time it actually, hindered the recording period. So we went up to the mountains and a lot of crazy stuff ended up happening. We got separated, got lost, and then both ended up going back home, like, because we got separated from each other. And then after that is when the tree fell on his house. So crazy, crazy stuff. So
if you have the fucking voodoo doll, stop poking it.
Yeah, please stop. We're trying to podcast here. So what have you been watching over the last 2 weeks?
I'm glad you asked, Justin. I've been watching some super gnarly stuff. And, there's this one movie, guys. It's on Shudder. You guys know we pull for Shudder hard, but it's a place to go.
Very much.
It's horror streaming, right? How can you go wrong there? $5 a month. Not affiliated with them. But hey,
Shudder, if you want to give us a sponsor, come on.
Yeah, right. But, pick up Shudder if you're into horror. It's cheap and you get a lot of originals on there. And this movie right here, guys, is called The Ranger. It's from 2018, directed by Jen Wexler, written by Glacco Ferrino and Jen Wexler. This movie's super rad, and it's because it combines two of my favorite things. So the synopsis here is teen punks on the run from the cops. They hide out in the woods and they come up against the local authority, an unhinged park ranger with an axe to grind. Can you guess what my two favorite things are from that synopsis, Justin?
For you, it is probably going to be the fact that they are in the woods and they are punks.
Yes. So, if you guys know me personally, or if not, you'll come to know me personally through this podcast, and Justin as well. We're pretty similar. We live in a mountainous area of our state. So, like he said, we were in the mountains last week. His family, my family, we're always up there. Just something we like doing. And so one of my favorite things is, being in the mountains, right? Being in national parks, that sort of thing, right? And I grew up as a punk. I predominantly still listen to only punk music. I went through a whole death metal, black metal phase. I still listen to a lot of that stuff, a lot of hardcore. But yeah, predominantly punk music. So anytime that there are movies with horror films with punks in them, I'm immediately like, oh, gotta go see that, And this one is one of those. It doesn't disappoint. I liked this movie a lot, Justin, because it felt really authentic. The characters, it didn't seem like sometimes when they have these characters that are in these subcultures of America, right? Whether they have punks or whether they're these other, like, you know what I mean, subcultures, right? It feels forced, right? This felt authentic, like you really believed each one of these kids could be like somebody you grew up with if you grew up as a punk, right? And it felt weird. The whole movie felt weird without being unbelievable, which is a big selling point for me. The acting was solid and the cinematography was pretty good. One of the things I enjoyed about it is the park ranger, spoiler alert, these kids they end up killing a cop, and they have to hide out in the woods because one of the main characters, she has a cabin in the woods, or her family had a cabin in the woods. And so they go out there to hide out at this cabin. But while they're there, a park ranger starts hunting them because they're out there doing dumb shit like starting random bonfires and spray painting the trees and all kinds of stuff like that. Stuff that, normal punk ass kids normally do. And as he's killing them, he has this thing where, or as he's tracking them down, he is reciting like national park rules and guidelines and stuff like that. And the ironic part about it is that stuff like these rules are stuff about like brandishing a gun in a national park as he's shooting at them with his rifle. So it's like if they have a gun, he's like, shooting at them with his rifle, but he's, it's very contradictory, but it's hilarious in a way where it's not over the top funny. It's like not supposed to be super serious,
Right.
but it's not supposed to be a comedy either. So it's definitely rad. Check it out. It's called The Ranger. Highly recommend it. What have you watched this week?
Well, I need to add that to my list because I have watched the trailer, and it gives me like a kind of like a. Have you seen Desierto with Jeffrey Dean Morgan?
No.
He's basically like a crazy. He would call himself a patriot, but he's like a far right kind of dude, and like there's immigrants trying to come across the border, and he takes it upon himself to like go out and he starts hunting them, basically. But it's like that, but in the woods with some like punk teens. So I'm definitely gonna check that out. So speaking of Shudder, I don't want to stay on this too much because there's another thing that was my main pick for this week. But so this came out last year. It's a 3-part miniseries called Blood Machines. This was a trip. I know I told you to watch it. I don't know if you got to check it out yet.
No, not yet.
But the story is kind of so-so. It's not like it's the best thing in the world, but it's not bad. But the visuals of this are insane. It's normally I'm all about practical effects, but the CGI in this, like, because this takes place, in like the future and space and like all these crazy like nebulas and stuff going on. But it's like everything the Marvel Cinematic Universe wanted to do with their CGI, this film like just knocked it out of the park and then some.
Which is crazy to say because you imagine that the Marvel has a way bigger budget than this, so the CGI looks that much better in this.
Oh yeah, like go watch any of the trailers right now, like while I'm talking about it, even for like 5 seconds, you'll be like, oh shit.
Well, I'm looking at stills right now, and it looks super, super gnarly. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't give me the full effect of what the CGI is, but like, has a
Right.
very like this one shot here reminds me of the Watchmen movie. Like a
Yeah.
lot of the CGI in that.
But yeah, so definitely check that out. Like I said, it's a little 3-part miniseries, came out last year. But the main thing I want to talk about So Andrew and I both, collect VHS tapes. So, I collect all kinds of physical media, DVDs and Blu-rays too. But so I checked out this thing. It's called VHS Massacre. It's a 2016 documentary on the decline of physical media and especially video stores and VHS stuff. So basically, they go around to all these different mom and pop video stores, and then even some of them, like during the course of the documentary being made, closed down. And they talk about, Betamax leading into VHS, leading into DVD, into Blu-ray, into streaming, pirating, all this stuff. And then they interview, people like Lloyd Kaufman from Trauma, Joe Bob Briggs, and just talks about how, you know, basically like it's a small niche, like cult group of people who are still collecting, especially VHS. And it's getting to the point where even just physical media, period. So it's kind of sad. It was actually kind of depressing.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So definitely check out VHS Massacre. I think I watched it on Amazon Prime. So
Which is
what's this
a
other pick?
which is a place Amazon Prime has some hidden
Yeah.
gems. The good thing about Amazon Prime, Justin, is like you don't have to. It's not like finding stuff on Shudder or finding stuff on Netflix where you have to be. You can be an indie filmmaker and you can shoot something for $300 and you can get it put on Amazon Prime. You know what I mean? So you
Yep.
can find all kinds of crazy stuff on Prime. You know, it's a good place to find horror, especially independent horror. So my next pick, guys, is also on Shudder. It's called Daniel Isn't Real. This is from 2019. Have you watched this yet, Justin?
I have not. I keep hearing about it. I think I've seen the trailer. Maybe. This isn't the one. Is this the one that everyone was saying like made people see demons in their houses?
No, I don't.
Or
Well,
is
I don't.
that some other?
No, I don't think so. So this one, guys, this is actually the movie me and my wife were watching, and we had just finished this movie like by 10 minutes, and then that's when that big ass tree decided it was gonna fall. We were laying in bed watching a movie. It happened at 11 o'clock at night, and as soon as we finished this, we were just laying there talking about it. Next thing we know, we just heard this crazy crashing sound, and it was that big tree. So, little interesting fact about my viewing of this movie. But
Before you dive into this, I want to just go ahead and throw out real quick. I just fact checked myself. The film I was thinking of is the Netflix horror film Eli.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
It's supposedly so terrifying that viewers were seeing demons in their homes. I haven't watched it, but I still call bullshit. But okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so Daniel Isn't Real, directed by Adam Egypt Mortimer. This guy directed Some Kind of Hate and the movie Holidays. It was also written by Brian DeLue. The synopsis of this is a troubled college freshman, Luke, suffers a violent family trauma. He then resurrects his charismatic childhood imaginary friend Daniel to help him cope, not realizing how dangerous Daniel is. So essentially, this movie is about this guy, this little kid. He has this little imaginary friend, and he gets this friend by, like I said, he has this trauma as a kid. And he runs out of his house and he sees this crime scene, and it shows the beginning of the movie shows this guy walk into a coffee house and the guy starts shooting up the coffee house. The police come and kill the guy in a very Chucky type of way. This guy that was killing the people in the coffee house becomes the imaginary friend of this little kid, except he's also a little kid. Or that's how I took it, right? Because he sees the guy's dead body, and the next thing you know, he has this imaginary friend. And the imaginary friend starts out as just a playful, making him play, and he just has somebody to hang out with. And then next thing you know, the imaginary friends want to do bad shit. And Daniel, the little kid, or the imaginary friend, like I said, starts doing bad stuff, and the little kid locks him away in a dollhouse. Then what happens is he grows up. He becomes a a young adult, and then he realizes that he needs somebody in his life because his mom is crazy. He ends up putting her in a psych ward. He needs somebody in his life, so he unlocks Daniel from the dollhouse, and Daniel starts out helping him talk to women, and sort of have a personality, because this guy's never really had a personality because he suffered traumatic stuff as a kid, and then all of a sudden Daniel wants to start doing bad shit again. So I'm not gonna spoil the movie. This one's definitely worth watching. The acting's good. It gets a little crazy at the end because all of a sudden you're like, what the hell is going on? Why did they throw this in? But it's still worth it. I would definitely check it out.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna
horror news.
Like I said,
what you got?
I've seen people talking about that. So horror news real quick. I mean, this is kind of, like I said, we were supposed to put this episode out a week ago, so this isn't the most up-to-date stuff anymore. But so as you all know by now, Scream 5 is happening. So I've been reading a little bit about it. So it's supposed to be like a revamp kind of thing, not a reboot, but from what I understand, it's supposed to focus on some new characters, but they are bringing back like the legacy characters. So I think kind of the same deal they did with Scream 4, but this is the thing I wanted to talk about because this is interesting. So David Arquette has officially signed back on as Dewey, but what do you think of those clips that I sent you of David Arquette as a professional wrestler?
And this is the weirdest thing ever, guys. So Justin sent me all these clips. He's like, "Did you know David Arquette was a wrestler?" I said, "I had no."
I went down a
freaking
YouTube
idea.
wormhole, dude, and watched like so many matches.
I mean, I was, because you have those actors like that, and you're like, I wonder what they're up to. Are they just like, out in LA enjoying their money? But no, apparently he's in sweaty high school gyms doing some professional wrestling. So he's done a lot too. He's fought in pay-per-view matches, and he's fought in I think I was looking at the WWE and all kinds of stuff, right? So he's been doing this for a little while.
He was a heavyweight world champion.
He's been doing it for a while,
Yeah.
So shout out to David Arquette. The funniest thing though was he was arguing with a crowd member at the beginning of one of the matches, and they were saying something like he's only wrestling because he's broke, and he's like, I got friends money, bitch.
Yeah, I got friends money. Oh man, it's definitely interesting. I mean, we all know that kind of wrestling isn't real. They're not trying to sell it as real. It's entertainment. When I was a kid, I watched it a lot, and he's definitely got the entertainment side down.
It's still real to me, damn it.
Yeah, still those chairs are still real, damn it.
It's still real to me, damn it.
Those tables are still real tables. But
yeah, so
yeah.
If you guys are a fan of Dewey from the Scream saga, go see him wrestle. Go to YouTube, type in David Arquette wrestling, and you won't be disappointed because there's lots of videos, and it's him in his truest form, being a straight up goofball, because that's what it is. He makes a total ass out of himself and then wrestles like hell. So
okay, so before we take a sponsor break and then dive into the main topic, so obviously if you're listening or watching right now, you know that the main topic is Italian horror films. So I want to talk about one particular Italian horror film because we both recently just revisited this because it was on Joe Bob Briggs, The Last Drive-In on Shudder. Another reason you guys need to get Shudder. You pay like $5 a month for Shudder, and you get access to like, they actually have live stuff. Like, yeah, you can search for films and stream on there, but every Friday night, Joe Bob Briggs, like if you guys remember Monster Vision on TNT back in the day, it's literally the same thing. It's just a different name. But, so let's talk about Cannibal Holocaust, Andrew.
yes, so Cannibal Holocaust, guys. Well, I'll let you segue us into this because you seem like you wanted to talk about Cannibal Holocaust.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to briefly touch on it. First of all, if you guys haven't seen this film, it is not for the faint of heart, or if you have a weak stomach.
Well, it's one of those movies you either love or you hate, right?
Well, I don't particularly hate it, but I definitely don't love it. I've also never just been like, hey, dude, you know what I want to watch today? Cannibal
That's right.
Holocaust.
Hey kid, you want to come over to my house and watch Cannibal Holocaust?
Yeah, dude, I got the sickest movie. Like you, this is definitely a movie though that if you would have discovered as a kid and like knew you weren't supposed to watch it, and you watched it, you'd have been like, "What the fuck?"
And I bet a lot of people did, right? I mean, this came out in 1980, so a lot of people probably snuck and saw this. Like, I was born in 86, so I didn't see this movie I didn't see this movie until my teens, right? So it was the early 2000s when I saw it for the first time. And then this last viewing last Friday was the first time I've watched this movie in, probably 5 or 6 years. Because it's not a movie to me that's super rewatchable because we've talked a little bit about this, Justin, but I think this movie lives on and lives on, not because of it being a great movie, but because of the shock value, right?
Oh yeah, this film is so. For any of you unfamiliar with this, this was sold as like, and I would honestly venture to say that it probably does hold this title, but it's sold as the most controversial film ever made. So filmmakers can try to take that title. Like, there's even a Dario Argento film that says that same thing. But this is surrounded by literal controversy, not just like, being
Marketing
shocking.
controversy.
Yeah, this is like, so it basically, if you've seen Green Inferno is basically a watered down version of Cannibal Holocaust.
It's Eli Roth paying extreme homage to.
Yes.
It's an updated version made for TV.
Yes, but the problem with that is you can't remake a film like Cannibal Holocaust if you're not going to fucking just like
be nastier than Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah, because Cannibal Holocaust, so these documentary filmmakers or whatever, they go and they're like, making a film about these tribes, but then they start like, they're dicks, right? Like they start like instigating stuff and setting fires to huts and shit just to get better like
footage
stuff for their documentary. So there's some gross shit in this. There's an actual turtle being killed, like not a turtle. It's a fucking tortoise. Yeah. Everyone talks about it being a turtle. It's a giant tortoise. And reportedly there were actually 2 killed because for some reason the first time they either weren't rolling or the footage wasn't usable. But so they basically cut this thing's head off, they rip its shell off, its bottom off, and they like gut it. Now supposedly they actually did really eat it. So I mean, it's like,
how can you be mad? But they're also just doing it for a movie. They're not just eating it because there was no other food. They were, right. So that's where the controversy lies with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so also the director was actually investigated for murder because he paid some of the actors and actresses. I don't know if he paid him for it, but they signed a contract to like disappear for a year because it was supposed to be like marketed as, well, these people really died. So then he was, being like burned pretty hard for it and being investigated. Like he was in legal shit. So he had to tell him basically, yeah, I know I told you to run away and like act like this was what was happening, but I'm not trying to go to prison. So he had to reveal some shit, like how he pulled off stuff. So I do want to, before we go away from it, because I mean, there are parts of this film that you're just watching and you're like, why? Like it just makes you feel, I'm not even religious, and this is the kind of film that makes you feel like you've got to go to church.
Makes you feel uncomfortable for sure. I mean, it's sort of like watching The Last House on the Left, that rape scene over and over again, right? It just makes you feel uncomfortable, and you're like, is this horror or is this something else? That's why everybody initially thought it was a snuff film, right? Everybody's like, this has to be real because this isn't like jump scares. This isn't like other Italian horror where it's like, it does not have any giallo elements whatsoever to it. It's just like straight up like, oh shit. And like found footage films back then weren't necessarily a thing yet, right?
Well, it was almost marketed as like, Mondo films, which if you guys are unfamiliar with those, it's like Faces of Death and shit like that. Like, right. Basically like National Geographic type stuff where it's like a real shit happening that's just demented and like disturbing.
And you guys gotta imagine too, like this is back in 1980, and I don't want to say people were stupid back then, but I want to say people weren't as intelligent as they are now. And I mean, what I mean by that is like if you threw in some indigenous people in a film in 1980, Like you're like, oh fuck, those are some real indigenous people, or those people only exist in the rainforest. Now it's like, those people of all walks of life are all over the place, right?
Right.
If you saw a film like that, you'd be like, oh, that's probably a paid actor. That guy definitely probably speaks English, and he's been in 17 Spielberg films. You know what I mean? Like, but back then you're like, oh shit, because people were so like, oh, that's an indigenous person. They must really be from the Amazon, and they must really only eat turtles and eat people and shit. But I have an interesting fact about this, Justin. Did you know that this was the second highest grossing film in Japan in 1983, only behind E.T.?
I did not know that, but that is fucking crazy.
Yeah, right.
Also, I guess it makes sense because I'm a collector. I collect DVDs and Blu-rays. So I just looked this up on Diabolic DVD's website. You can get the 3-disc Blu-ray Grindhouse releasing of Cannibal Holocaust. Only you can't actually currently get it because it's sold out. Like, oh man.
I'm looking at facts
People
about this
wanted
film.
it that bad.
Yeah, I'm looking at facts about this film, and I want to say that they're on the internet, so they must be true. So I just want to read a couple of these facts real quick, Justin, and just see what your take on them are. So, the shot where you get the full frontal nudity of the professor when he's bathing in the river. Apparently, this says the women in the scene were hired from a local brothel. So the women that like are grabbing on his junk and stuff, they're all from a local brothel. Also, let me see. The film was banned in 50 countries.
I'm curious, like, this might sound like the dumbest question, but I wonder if like that had something to do with, well, I can get by with paying them their rate for the brothel to feel up on this dude for less than I would have to pay them if I was paying them as an actor.
I think maybe that had to do with it, but I think more or less it was like, how can we get X amount of women to do full frontal nudity on camera?
Yeah, true. That, and eventually it's just like, yeah, well, you found out all my secrets, but it's still fucking controversial as shit.
And then when
they're prostitutes.
Yeah, and then when people find out what kind of movie it is, I mean, if you look at the script, it's kind of like, I don't think a lot of people would want to be in that at that magnitude. I mean, a lot of people would want to be in the movie, but play that part like, oh yeah, you just have this naked river woman part. You know what I mean? Like,
yep. Get PJ Souls just to come out of the river.
Sherry Moon zombie in the river. Wait till this is remade.
It's going to be rebooted, and she's definitely going to come out of the river and say, "Fuck you, motherfucker!"
Rob Zombie's Cannibal Motherfucking Holocaust.
Oh my god!
It's the Catalina wine mixer. I don't even know what tangent I'm going off on. Anyways, so this movie was banned in 50 countries. Italy banned it for 3 years. Authorities at a 1993 Birmingham comic fair seized the movie, and Norway banned it completely until 2003. So there's a lot to unpack there. Ruggero Deodato, sorry if I'm butchering his name, was inspired to make this movie after seeing his son watch a violent news report on TV. He noticed that the journalists focused on the violence and believed that some news angles were staged to capture more sensational footage, which I fully believe that fact, because that's sort of how, it takes place in the movie, where, like you said, the guys are, the documentarians are, staging these things to try and get more outrageous footage and try to incite violence among the tribes. Right. Because at first you're kind of like, oh man, I hope this tribe doesn't hurt these people, and then you're like, kill those motherfuckers. Yeah. You're like, kill them all. Kill them, Jason.
You do eventually start rooting. Kill them for momming Jason.
Yeah. You start rooting for the tribe,
Yeah. How's it going, creeps? One quick mid-episode break to tell you a little more about our sponsor. Since 2016, Everblack Coffee Company has delivered exceptional single-origin coffee and high fives all over the world. They understand that a cup of coffee is so much more than something you drink. That's why they source their beans from farms that only use fair trade and organic growing practices. When you buy coffee from Everblack, you can be certain that you're getting the highest quality coffee available by ethical means only. it's time to start looking at coffee differently. Head over to everblackcoffee.com and grab a bag for yourself. It's deliciously dark. Now back to the show. All right, welcome back. So hit me with this last factoid about cannibal holocaust.
This is a fucking gnarly fact, Justin. And they mentioned this in the last drive-in episode of Cannibal Holocaust. I don't know if you knew this, but did you know that Lamberto Bava was first AD on Cannibal Holocaust?
I did not know
Isn't that gnarly? Like, we're gonna get into some Bava stuff here in a bit, but like that blew my mind when I heard it, and I had to fact check it just now because I know that on the last drive-in they're not gonna give you false information, but like I have not seen this with my own eyes, so I had to check on it, and it is in fact true. IMDb says so. So, yeah, that's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah, so like as we get into this main topic of discussion, which is Italian horror, Andrew and I are major Italian horror films.
We're
so here's
major
the thing,
Italian
like,
horror films.
we're major Italian horror film fans. Yes, we ourselves are the embodiment of
I'm
Italian
a fucking
horror.
giallo through and through.
Yes. But as you start going into the world of Italian horror films, and whether it be, more gore stuff or giallo, you'll see that there are a couple of people that are like filmmakers at the top. They are the kings, and they all have their specialty. And we'll touch on that a little bit. But the first thing we really want to talk about is giallo. So giallo, once you start, researching Italian horror, you're going to see this word thrown around a lot. Now, some people just generalize Italian horror as giallo, period, but that is not necessarily the case. Giallo has a very stylistic tone and certain tropes, right? So, do you want to explain a little bit of where that term comes from, or do you want me to take a little bit of that?
I just want to make a direct comparison to that, and then I'll let you talk more about giallo. So giallo, the way it's thrown around, Justin, reminds me a lot of the way we have thrown slasher around in American cinema, right? So like we call a lot of stuff slasher. That's not necessarily slasher. It just has maybe slasher elements, or it is a film that is now made that's not a slasher, but a director at one time in his career made a slasher film, so everything else they do for the rest of their life is called a slasher. So I feel like giallo is the same way. But if you want to talk about the term, man, you can go ahead. That's more your area. There is the historical part of that.
Yeah, so I agree 100% with that, because you've got your heavy hitting Italian horror filmmakers like Dario Argento, Lucio Fulci, and Mario Bava, not to be confused with several other Bavas. But they all have like their specialties, but they've all at some point made an actual tried and true giallo film. But then Fulci, branches off eventually later in his career into more undead kind of gory films, and they all start to branch off from that. But so the term originates from these like cheap pulp mystery paperback novels, or not so much novels, but just these little paperback books in like the early to mid 1900s in Italy. And giallo is the Italian word for yellow. So these were called giallo because the covers of these paperback novels were yellow. And, they were basically these just mystery novels, kind of detective whodunit style things. And then it started to cross over into films, and giallo films span anywhere from like mystery, detective, to a little bit of suspense. And they've got slasher and exploitation like overtones. But to be more specific, they do have to have more of that mystery kind of detective thing to make it a giallo. So, some examples, and some of these we'll actually dive more into later in the episode, but some truest to form giallo films I've got written here. Suspiria, which is a big one. That is probably the king of Italian horror, the king of giallos. The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Blood and Black Lace, So these very just whodunit. It's basically like a slasher, where it's like a whodunit, right? You don't necessarily. It's not like Halloween or Friday the 13th, where the killer is like you're supposed to know who it is. So we've got some. Basically, what we've done is we've taken some of our favorite Italian horror films, and we want to kind of just break them down for you guys that you might be new to Italian horror, or for some of you who are very familiar with it, maybe, just give you like an interesting conversation about something you're already familiar with. So we're going to talk about some that are actual giallos first. So do you want me to go into my main one, or do you want to throw in what we would actually probably consider the king of giallos?
Let's talk about the King of Giallo. Let's go into that one
Let's do
first.
it.
So, guys, when I think of Italian horror, I think of Dario Argento, and most of us do, right? He is the freaking god of Italian horror. So, Suspiria was written, directed by Argento himself, or as Justin would like to say, by God himself or
By
herself.
God himself,
Herself.
their self.
Their self, whichever you want to use. So Suspiria, the original, was released in 1977. Of course, there's a remake out there, as remakes are. They all, they all come after every good horror movie from the 70s or 80s. We always try to remake those just to put asses in seats. We're not talking about the remake here. We're talking about Argento's. So if you've seen it, you love it, right? It's not a movie that you're on the fence about. It's just a movie you love. You find something to love about this movie. If not the story, if not, the acting is kind of crazy, but for the 70s, it wasn't too bad. But the best thing about it is the feeling that they can make you have after watching this, right? So this movie is one of those that is very good at. We talked about how certain horror directors and writers can create an atmosphere or create an environment for the viewer, and Suspiria is one of those. So it creates this.
Very
It
much
creates
so.
this just technicolor nightmare of neon, blood, and there's not gore in this one, right? It's just like suspense and just
Well, there's blood, but it's like it's the classic. The thing about giallo is actual like giallo, the subgenre, because some Italian horror's got like more realistic looking blood, but giallo's got that really bright red. It's not supposed to look realistic. So there's a couple scenes in this, like with the girl who gets cut with the window or whatever.
right.
Um, like that blood. So there's a good bit of blood in this film, but it's like that over the top stylistic Argento blood. It's like straight up like neon red, as you keep throwing out the word neon. Like neon is something in giallo films, especially with like even just the lighting and the cinematography, especially with Dario Argento's stuff, Suspiria mainly. With you got red and blue lighting and stuff like that. Whereas some people, honestly, like a lot of modern YouTubers rip off their entire lighting setup from Dario Argento's Suspiria. But
Right. So like you
yeah,
said, the window death, right, is super gnarly. It when you first watch the movie and you see foreshadowing of that stained glass in the ceiling, and then later on, one of the best scenes is when I'm trying to think of the actress's name. Anyways, her head gets smashed through the window, and then she falls through, and she's hanging there in the lobby of the building, and that is one of the main scenes. Like if you look up anything Suspiria, you're gonna see that shot. Um,
right, and that's the death that like sets the whole story off too.
right, for sure.
Right? That's like right at the beginning. That's when she arrives. So we didn't mention the synopsis, but real quick. So an American newcomer to a prestigious German ballet academy comes to realize that the school is a front for something sinister amid a series of grisly murders. So it takes place in this big like ballet academy that later you find out used to be like a school for witches, essentially. So this American girl like shows up, And then the first thing that happens is this death that we're talking about. So it's just kind of like, bam.
Right. So like I said, one of the main things about this film you're going to notice is the cinematography. So the cinematographer, Luciano Tovoli, incredibly talented guy. The way you see them use color in this film, and it's one of those that relies a lot on color theory. Depending on the colors in the shot, you can kind of tell what's going to happen as they're either more muted or they get crazier. You can kind of tell more crazy shit's going to happen. And Justin, to talk about one of the best things about this film, the soundtrack. So if you think about Suspiria, then you're going to think of that killer Goblin soundtrack.
Yes. Goblin is like I don't know too much about the band themselves. I had honestly never heard anything about them until, I got into horror films and then Suspiria. But they're an actual band and they just play this kind of stuff normally. And you're just like, that shit is like sick.
Right. So they play,
But
yeah, it's just like a rock. It's like a rock album. They're an Italian prog rock band from the 70s. And you could listen to the album you could listen to the album and you would not ever think that it would be a score for a film, just with how crazy it is, but it matches the film so well that I don't know. It's just a crazy matchup, right? And this isn't the only time that Argento's worked with Goblin, but
yeah, the soundtrack. Well, that's the thing about a lot of giallos, especially going into the next one that we'll talk about, which is one of my favorite giallo films ever. So Suspiria is what we would call the king of giallos. It really is like a masterclass, in my opinion, of just the cinematography. And to one more key point about the lighting before we move on, it's also almost like, it's not just, they set up some lights and, started rolling camera. There are some scenes in Suspiria, especially, where it's like a stage play, right? You're filming and there's no light on a certain thing, and then like as your attention is supposed to be drawn to it, like someone on set, their job was to actually turn on that light. Or like the scene where the girl like she eventually gets killed, like she falls into that pit of like the wire. Whenever she first gets attacked and the window breaks behind her, like you can already see through that glass and there's no light, but as soon as the glass breaks, it goes from just being like lit blue to now there's red thrown in. So like the color signifies, like when the mood is changing. And that's just a testament to Italian horror, period, is they were all about their visuals and telling stories with the visuals. Like everything was motivated. There was no just pointless lighting. And then that also, that segues us into what is my favorite giallo film, which is another Dario Argento film, and that is 1975's Deep Red. So I feel like where Suspiria, it does follow the tropes, it's more rooted in, its thing is the cinematography. Everything is just these neon colors and the way the camera moves, and it's like, it's a masterpiece in my opinion on a technical aspect. The story's good, but technically it is a masterpiece. So to me, I know you and I have talked about this film a little bit. You enjoy it, but it's not your favorite. But to me, Deep Red is more of a masterclass in giallo itself from a story standpoint. So what's your opinion on that statement?
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, it plays more on the like I said, on giallo, the definition of giallo in its truest sense, with the whole the more of the
It's more of a detective thing.
right, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Is it's more of the detective stuff, and it's less it plays less on like the cinematography and stuff like that. And because to where Suspiria feels more like horror slash giallo, this one feels more giallo than horror. So I agree with you.
Right. So Deep Red, 1975, directed by Dario Argento. It was written by Dario Argento and Bernardino Zapponi. So this is about a jazz piano player and a wisecracking journalist who are pulled into a complex web of mystery after the former witnesses the brutal murder of a psychic. So this film right away, it jumps in like, I don't know how recently you've watched this film, but I revisit this film quite often. It starts off there at like this big seminar kind of thing with this psychic woman, and then she is later murdered, but you never see who murdered her. It's a somebody wearing the typical like leather gloves, and it never shows their face, and they're wearing like a big trench coat, and so this jazz piano player witnesses her die. And the cinematography of this is great. Don't get us wrong about that. It's just, if you watch Suspiria and Deep Red, you'll see what we mean. Suspiria like prides itself.
It's two totally different aesthetics, two totally different aesthetics.
Yeah. But Deep Red, so basically now they're trying to figure out who murdered this woman, and they go down like it's like Clue or something like that. It's almost got like the very Murder, She Wrote kind of vibe, but it's with slasher elements. Like there's gore, and it's like a serial killer kind of thing. So I don't want to stay on this one too long.
It's definitely a weird movie though. Like this movie's it's just weird to me.
And this one has a weird soundtrack too. This one's got a lot of like upbeat 70s kind of rock stuff, and then it does get weird with like the the children's music, and then like the little doll, and that sort of thing.
The whole doll aspect was tripping me out when I watched it.
Now I do want to point out one thing before we leave this film. As much of a Halloween fan as I am, and the original Halloween 2, there is a kill that is probably the coolest kill in that film. It was completely inspired by Deep Red, because in the original Halloween 2, there's the scene where the paramedic and the nurse, they go to like the spa room, and they're about to have sex, and Michael comes in and he kills the paramedic, and then he turns up the heat in the spa or the jacuzzi tub, whatever. And then he goes in and he simultaneously like is drowning and burning this nurse alive in like boiling water. So in Deep Red, there's a scene where, the person comes in with the gloves, and you see them turn on the bathtub, and it's like full boiling hot, and it's like basically the same scene.
Right.
And I just think that's probably one of the coolest little homages. Like, not a lot of people, say, oh, that's from Deep Red, but that's definitely from Deep Red. And then that also leads to one of the coolest scenes in the film about, someone finding out a clue towards who did it. So that's Deep Red, 1975. Check it out. It's one of my favorite giallos as far as the story standpoint. Its cinematography is definitely not as good as Suspiria. It does have some clever little things, like with the painting in the mirror. You know what I'm talking about.
Right.
But don't want to ruin that one for people who haven't seen it. So check out Suspiria and Deep Red.
Yeah, so
you want to take us into this? This is another. All three of these are. Have you realized all three of our giallo picks were Argento films?
I fucking love Argento. So
yes,
like I said, for me, Suspiria is the end all be all with just that's coming from a camera operator, cinematographer here. I just the cinematography on that inspires a lot of my personal work, but there are things that movie lacks that I do like better in this movie here, and I'm talking about 1985's Phenomena, again written by Argento. There's so many more giallos out there written by so many more people, but these are our favorite, right? We recognize there's so much more out there to see, but these are our favorite. And then this is written by Dario Nicolodi, who also wrote Deep Red, and also written by Argento himself again. So the synopsis of this one is: a young girl with an amazing ability to communicate with insects is transferred to an exclusive Swiss boarding school where her unusual capability might help her solve a string of murders. So one interesting thing about giallos, Justin, is if you're going to go to a boarding school, or a private school or a ballet school or any type of school, do not go to one overseas
Yep.
because Argento says bad shit's
Nope.
gonna happen to you. But
Yes.
so this movie has a lot of fun stuff about it. One interesting thing is the main actress is played by the one and the only Jennifer Connelly. Um, and there's also another well-known American actor in this, Donald Pleasance, who plays
Yep.
the one and only Dr. Loomis from the Halloween franchise. They're both excellent in this movie, and this movie again has great cinematography, but in a different way than like Suspiria or Deep Red. This one has more like the whole beginning of it has this very I don't even know like what you would call like a Tumblr aesthetic nowadays, right? Like the whole landscape
Yeah.
shots of
Yeah.
Norway, you know what I mean? Like in just the way they dress up Jennifer Connelly and they block her in scenes. It has this whole like Tumblr Instagram aesthetic to it. It's beautifully shot, right? Like this is an amazingly well shot film. But do you have any other interesting tidbits about this? I mean,
Yeah. So Phenomena goes into another trope of Giallo that isn't in every Giallo film, but a good bit of them, and that's like the very dreamy aspect,
right.
because this film has a lot of dream kind of
Sequences?
dream sequences, but they're rooted more in like the supernatural, like with Jennifer Connelly's character, like her psychic abilities is how they're not just throwing random dream sequences in this film. Like it's rooted in one of the characters. But so there's that, and then there's also she has a connection with insects, which is like a major point of the film.
Well,
So
there's that one scene where she's making the beetle horny, and Donald Pleasance is like, he's becoming sexually aroused or whatever. He's like, I've
Yep.
never seen that happen before, or something like that. And that scene was weird as fuck. But yeah,
yeah, well, it's Argento. He's got to throw something weird in there.
yeah,
But I mean, in this, it's still following Giallo, because so basically there's like multiple stories going on at once, because you could take out the serial killer element and them trying to track down this murderer who's like murdering these girls, and you would have a whole film on its own, because it's almost got some like Carrie vibes.
oh for
So-
sure.
Yeah, so there's that storyline going on, but then because of her abilities, like they're trying to use that to figure out this thing, but it's also like a coming of age story because she's being made fun of by these other people. And not just for them calling her a freak because of the bugs or whatever. Like her dad's also famous, so there's already like
Right.
she's already in the spotlight. Her dad's like an actor or whatever. So it's definitely a crazy film. There's a lot going on, multiple storylines that all segue together, and it still follows, the tropes.
What about Inga? Let's talk about Inga.
To take it away.
Let's talk about Inga, guys. So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think this is an important,
No, you're good.
important aspect before we go much further on Phenomena. So, Inga is the name of the chimpanzee in Phenomena, and this is Donald Pleasance's. It's like his lab assistant, I guess, is
Yeah, it's
essentially
like his Igor kind of thing.
So Inga, apparently there's a scene. I didn't know this up until recently, just researching stuff on this movie. The scene near the end or the second half of the movie where the monkey starts freaking out. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. They were trying to get the monkey or the chimpanzee to look directly into the camera, but apparently the chimp wanted to keep turning itself away from the camera, and they needed a shot of the front of it. So Argento reportedly had told Jennifer Connelly, just, put your hand on Inga to make sure Inga doesn't turn around. And apparently Inga decided she was going to bite off the tip of Jennifer Connelly's finger. So From what I've read, is people try to bring this up in interviews to Jennifer Connelly, but she refuses to talk about it. And I don't know if it's because it's a traumatizing experience, because she's just so over phenomena in this part of her life, or maybe she's still sour about it, because it was something that happened to her when she was relatively young, and it was something that was not her fault. She was directed to do it, so maybe she's mad still, like she was ever put in that position and she misses the tip of her
Right.
finger. Like, I don't know, but so this is a real true story, and interesting fact. Like I never would have thought she was missing the tip of her finger. So
Yeah. So, Inga, you bastard.
also the soundtrack.
But
Who's the soundtrack
Goblin.
by? Goblin again. This is what we were
Goblin.
talking about from Suspiria. So Argento is known for Suspiria. On that set, blasting Goblin on set, the soundtrack to elicit these certain emotions and performances from his actors. So he used Goblin again on this movie, and you can definitely tell it is it's another great soundtrack. So if you're looking for movie scores to buy or movie soundtracks to get, especially on vinyl, like Suspiria 1977 and Phenomena 1985 are definitely two soundtracks you want to pick up. Like I said, especially on vinyl, or if not, you can just stream them, but they can be listened to separately, right? Like a lot of scores are great, but you can't necessarily listen to them and enjoy them, right? These you can fully
Right. Or
enjoy.
without it being like gimmicky.
Right, yeah. You don't want like the epic choirs and shit like that. This actually sounds like instrumental music, right? That just happens to be written for a equally awesome movie. So let's move out of Argento territory and let's talk about some fucking gore. So you wanna
Okay. Yes.
you wanna take it?
Yes. I will take this first one. So Argento is the king of giallo. That's just a fact of Italian horror. But there's another man.
There's another man in my life.
There is another man in my life by the name of Lucio Fulci, the king of Italian gore.
More like Lucio. Fuck
So-
yeah.
Yeah, Lucio, fuck yeah. Give me some blood. So, first film that we picked out here is the 1979 classic Zombie. Now, this film actually came out by a lot of other names also. It was released as Zombie 2, The Dead Are Among Us, and it was supposed to be like a sequel to the original Dawn of the Dead. But you want to jump into the synopsis here?
Yeah, guys. So it's about strangers searching for a young woman's missing father. They arrive at a tropical island where a doctor desperately seeks the cause and cure of a recent epidemic of the undead. Written by Elisa Briganti and again directed by Fulci. Stars Tessa Farrow, Ian McCulloch, Richard Johnson. Justin, there's a whole lot of fun stuff about this movie.
Yes.
Aside from the gore, I mean, what were your favorite things about it?
Okay, well, I do want to touch on the gore for just a second because this is 1979, guys. This is before, your CGI and all of that stuff. So a lot of this gore, it's not like it's super realistic looking. It's very campy, but to me that's like the best gore. Like your old the original Evil Dead and stuff like that. But Italian horror is even almost more like the gore gags are even more raw than that to me. So this film, there's two scenes in particular, with the practical effects. One, we'll talk about the funniest film, or the funniest scene probably in this film. If you've ever wondered if there's a movie where you have a naked underwater photographer, a zombie, and a shark in a 3-way death match, well, it's Lucio Fulci Zombie. So basically, they're out on this boat. Like they find the two main characters. They're looking for this girl's dad, and they find these two, or like this couple on a boat. And it doesn't take any convincing at all, right? For them to be like, yeah, well, we'll take you to this island that we know is like, we've literally just told you has crazy shit going on. But anyway, so they're on the way to this island, and the dude's girlfriend's just like, yeah, I want to go. I want to stop here and take some pictures. So she gets naked except for like bathing suit bottoms, dives in the water, is taking some underwater photos, and then a shark starts coming after her. Well, you're like, oh my God, this is crazy, a shark. Then out of nowhere, an underwater zombie
Fuck yes.
attacks her. That's like, yes.
Fuck
It's like,
yes.
fuck yes, but what was he doing out there?
It doesn't
They're
matter.
like,
It's a fucking underwater zombie. Does not matter.
true. But so she gets away, and then the zombie and the shark fight each other. It was a real shark.
Yes. A
And
real tiger shark. Not just a shark. This was a tiger
a
shark.
fucking tiger shark.
Yeah, so the tiger shark, guys, like Justin was about to go into, I'm going to steal this from you. Tiger shark is one of the most dangerous shark species that exists, right? So they had a shark trainer named Ramon
One of the coolest
Bravo.
too, though.
Do what?
I said one of the coolest.
Yes,
too,
one of the
though.
coolest, right? It has a sweet name, right? So Ramon Bravo, he was a shark trainer, or as I would refer to him, shark wrangler. He fed the shark right before filming, and they also reportedly doped it up on tranquilizers. Not the coolest thing in the world, but it made one of the coolest scenes.
We don't, we don't support that.
Sort of like talking about the tortoise earlier. We don't support that, but it resulted in one of the coolest scenes ever. From what I have read, Fulci thought this entire scene was freaking silly, the whole zombie versus shark, so he refused to shoot it. So it ended up being shot, I think, by the second unit because the producer of Zombie was like, no, we're shooting this goddamn shark versus zombie scene right fucking now. And Fulci was like, you know what? You shoot that dumb shit yourself. I'll be back in a couple days to finish the movie. And that's what happened. So that's why this scene exists, because there's literally, like Justin said, there's no reason for a zombie to be in the water. It makes zero sense with the plot of the movie, but it's fucking there, and it's in cinema. It is documented in Italian cinema horror, and it's there, and it's fucking rad. And had Fulci known it was going to be as rad as it is, maybe he would have shot it himself.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, he probably been like, I'm Lucio.
So instead of like, how we have the modern day, like the legend of the Snyder cut for Justice League, can we get the Fulci cut of the shark versus zombie scene?
That's what I'm trying to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's it on the shark versus zombie. There's no point in it other than just being rad.
Yeah. But speaking of, the practical effects and the gore. So this film also has one of the craziest scenes. Like if someone says Fulci's zombie, you either automatically think of the shark versus zombie scene, or all I have to say is the eyeball scene. So there are a lot of films, in the 80s that did practical stuff with like eyeballs or whatever, but this scene is like there's a woman, basically she's hiding, and the zombie like breaks the door, and there's like a long like jagged piece of the door sticking out, and he just slowly, like it's a long grueling scene, just like slowly pulls her towards this thing, and it's a close up of this like the wooden like shank looking piece of the door just going through her eyeball,
Right.
and you see the whole thing. And it like busts her eye, and it's just glorious and gory, and that's Fulci, baby.
So the makeup for this, Justin, was done by one Gianetto De Rossi, who also did makeup for the original Dune. And do you remember High Tension from 2003?
High Tension?
Yeah, he also
Yes.
did the makeup on that. So this guy is obviously, he's done all kinds of stuff, right? He has 69 credits to his name, but he's done all kinds of awesome movies, stuff like Man in the Iron Mask, Killer Crocodile, Rambo 3, King Kong Lives, Conan the Destroyer. He also did makeup for The Beyond. So he's done all kinds of rad shit, right? Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. So this guy is no rookie, right? To making these zombies look as cool as they did in this film, especially the cover art for the poster and for the film, the zombie, the decaying zombie with the maggots and stuff, really super rad. And one cool thing, Justin, is this movie, when you think of zombie films, you think of stuff like, The Walking Dead and shit like that. But zombie movies of this era played a lot on voodoo legends, right? And that's kind of what this movie's based around. And that's what makes this feel sort of like a giallo, right? Because it's not zombie horror, it's zombie voodoo legend, right?
Right, and they're also trying to get down to the bottom of it. So there is like this whole like you've got the reporter and then the woman whose dad is actually missing. So they're trying to
The
like
whodunit.
go detective. Yeah, so they're almost like just like the pair, like the reporter and the jazz piano player from Deep Red. Only now it's two different characters on the same kind of goal, but they go to this island where there's like these like, undead things like eating people. So
Did you know this was when this was first submitted to BBFC in 1980, the movie was passed with an X rating, and it was also banned in 1984 as a video nasty. This movie, can you believe it? This
Yes.
movie, like,
good old video nasties. Cannibal Holocaust was definitely a video nasty.
yeah,
But zombie, yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Like I knew this movie had a lot of like not necessarily controversy, but just like people being like, "Oh,
yeah,
Italian horror was doing things like that when like at this time American horror was trying to do like their version of slashers, which had its gore but not a whole lot. And Fulci was just like, we need more blood.
yeah. Fulci was like, throw some more gore in there, make that shit neon, and but I'm not gonna fight any fucking sharks. There's not gonna be any goddamn tiger shark versus zombie stuff, but we're gonna have some neon gore.
Yes.
But yeah, so this movie has so many good things about it. It is a definitely must watch. And since I talked about it earlier, let me circle back around to it, Justin, how I talk about punks in horror. So again, reportedly on this movie, Captain Haggerty, he plays a large bald zombie in the beginning of the film. Supposedly,
Yes, the boat zombie.
yes, he walked into CBGB's in full zombie makeup, and since punk fashion was so out there at this time in the late 70s, early 80s, he was in an interview and he talked about how hardly anybody even batted an eye at the way he looked when he walked into CBGB's. And if you don't know CBGB's, it's a famous super
Country, bluegrass, and blues.
Yes, used to be a very famous music venue there in New York City, where a whole lot of punk bands, they put their roots down. They're pretty interesting. Punks and horror, right?
Well, speaking of punks and horror, I have a question for you, Andrew.
Yes, sir.
What do you get when a pimp, a blind man, and a group of punks walk into a movie theater?
I can tell you what you get.
Tell
You
us
get
what
the
we
1985 classic by Lamberto Bava called Demoni. So,
Yes, or demons here in the States.
Demons, if you're an American citizen. So this movie, Demons, is one of my favorite Italian horrors. This I would put up there for me underneath Suspiria. And the reason this one is so great, directed by Bava, written by Argento. I can't get away from Argento.
Yeah. Now, Lamberto Bava, not to be confused with Mario Bava.
Right. Bava also wrote it, and then Dardano Sacchetti, who did New York Ripper, which is equally a fun movie, and City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, and quack quack. In 1990, The Bronx Warriors, which is if you've never seen The Bronx Warriors, it is like a great value version of the movie The Warriors. It is fucking so just seedy and like, I don't know. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Street Trash, a little bit of The Warriors. Watch it. It's worth a watch. It's really, I don't know. It's worth at least one watch. And then Franco Ferrini, who wrote on Opera and Once a Time in America, which was Sergio Leone's prohibition gangster flick. If you've never seen Once Upon a Time in America, you are missing out, as well as Opera. So, Justin, Demons. There is so much for me to talk about on this film. I'm going to try and rush through what I want to say about it, and then I'm going to have you take up because I know that it's getting close to that time. But one of the coolest things about this movie, guys, is the tagline, right? I mean, that sounds stupid, but the tagline is so gnarly to this. It is, they will make cemeteries their cathedrals. and the cities will be your tombs. If I can get that written on my headstone, if I was to have it as a headstone when I die, that would be the coolest shit ever. So let this be evidence when I die. Write that on my tombstone, everybody.
You heard it here.
So the synopsis of this one, guys, is a group of random people are invited to a screening of a mysterious movie only to find themselves trapped in the theater with ravenous demons. Essentially, they are invited to the mysterious film screening by a man wearing a mask who stalks our main actress in the subway for, the first part of the movie. He inevitably, you think this guy is chasing our actress to kill her, but he ends up just giving her a movie ticket to the Metropole. And it's this secret movie screening that only select people are invited to. The movie they're watching is about a group of 4 teens, and they're in this, I don't know, I'm going to call it like a crypt, right? Or like this cemetery environment, and they're trying to find Nostradamus' tomb, and then they open it up, and when they open up Nostradamus' tomb, it results in the dead crawling essentially out of the movie and terrorizing the audience, so to speak. So, Justin, you got any fun key points about this movie or why people should tune in and watch freaking Demons?
So, Demons is just the epitome of 1980s campy horror. Like it's 1985, so it's right in the middle of that era. So you've got not only the horror elements and the gore that comes from all these Italian filmmakers, you have 80s action influence. Like, the 80s was everything was over the top. So what gets more over the top than a dude on a dirt bike saving his woman with a samurai sword in a movie theater? Like, he's literally riding around fighting demons.
Gnarliest shit ever. I'm just saying, like, I mean, that's probably my favorite scene from this film. I mean, there's a whole lot of really cool scenes, but when George and Cheryl are the names of the characters there, they grab a motorcycle and sword that's on display in the lobby, and those things are on display because they play in part. They're like props from the movie that they're watching, right? So the movie that they go to see, there's dirt bikes and swords and all that stuff in there. So what they do is, once all this crazy shit starts happening, they go in there and they grab the dirt bike, they grab the sword, and slicing and dicing demons as they ride the dirt bike over the theater seats, right? Not just up and down the aisles, like he's riding on top of the seats. And an interesting fact about this, Justin, is that was an abandoned movie theater that they shot in, right? Because
yeah, it wasn't like a set,
right,
like a sound stage. Like, it was legit,
which is pretty cool because it adds authenticity to it. They supposedly went around trying to find these cineplexes that they could film in, but everybody was kind of like, "Oh, you're gonna ride a dirt bike in here?" Nope. Oh, there's neon blisters bursting all over the place. I don't know if moviegoers want to potentially sit in that once you leave, so that's a no. So they found an abandoned one, set up shop, and basically destroyed the shit out of it during filming. Anytime that something is a genuine set, it's sort of like using practical effects. It kind of sells that point for me.
Oh yeah. Well, and especially like in this story, like the theater itself was such a major part of the story. So cool little thing here. I didn't know this, but I see you added it to the notes. So the theater in the film is called the Metropole. So the original Silent Hill video game for PlayStation 1, which is like from 1999, scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. Probably shouldn't have been playing it at the age that I was. Like, you remember the little things like that were like 2 feet tall, running around with like little scalpels and shit or whatever they had? Yeah, that shit was
between
bonkers.
This and Resident Evil. It's just it was a frightening time as a kid.
Oh yeah, dude. Well, it's also like the low res graphics too. For some reason, just added like a creepiness factor to me. But so there is actually a building you can find in this game with the words Metropole scrolled across it using the same text and name as the one in Demons. And like it's literally written the exact same. So that's a cool little homage to Demons. But other than that, this film is just basically 1980s incarnate with not only like we talked about with the over the top action, but the music, the style of the characters. There's drugs, like they're snorting coke out of a Coca-Cola
We got horror
can.
punks.
Horror punks. You know, we need to do an episode on horror punks.
This is basically that episode. This is basically that episode. I mean, you've got Night of the Living Dead or Return of the Living Dead, I mean, and
yeah. But I mean, this film, the music, the soundtrack for this, it's not something that I'm like, God, I would like rock out to this every day. But you had like, okay, so Motley Crue for one. Those of you who don't know, I'm like not so much anymore. I mean, I still like them, but that used to be my shit. Like when I was a kid, like old school Motley Crue.
He's a Motley Crue historian.
So I actually could tell you probably about anything you asked me about Motley Crue. But so their song on this, Save Our Souls, is actually like a deep cut off of their 1985 album, Theater of Pain, which is ironic because this film is about a theater and there's people being killed by demons. So that song's in there.
Can you
so that's
can
really
you
cool.
go over that again, like your Jamie Josta from Headbangers Ball?
Oh my God, dude. Well, do you want that, or do you want it, since you want to go that route, do you want Ricky Ratman from like the original?
Let's do Ricky Ratman.
Headbangers Ball. Oh my God, he was like so energetic. He was like, "Welcome to Headbangers Ball, and tonight, you know, blah blah blah." And then the other dude was like, "So welcome to Headbangers Ball. Tonight we have Motley Crue, Save Our Souls." We're gonna
Motley
do an episode on
Crue,
the 80s
fuck
one
yeah,
day,
had a
dude.
banger on the soundtrack. Save Our Souls.
Motley Crue,
Fuck
fuck yeah,
yeah,
Save Our
boy.
Souls, fuck yeah, fuck yeah.
Theater of Pain. Fill it now.
Theater of Pain. Yeah. So basically, there's a lot of cool practical effects in this too. You know, this is still in the 80s. So it's not like there's like CGI and stuff. The demons in this were you could probably replace the story with zombies and it'd still work, but they were like, nah, fuck this. We need demons.
Yeah, fuck that.
Fuck
Fuck that
that
zombie shit.
Yeah, everybody's done zombies, man. But so one cool thing, so the actors that played the demons wore refractive paper over their eyes to give a glowing effect, like throughout the entire movie. So
Yes,
there's not like,
and I'm still in that idea.
okay,
Still-
for the film I think you're
Yeah,
talking about.
so we're shooting the film currently, and we have some glowing eye effects, and the way we're doing it works, but this could work better. So I'm gonna be purchasing some refractive paper. Thanks, Fulci.
Yep. So
Demons.
yeah, that's
Demons is great.
Demons
Demons is
guys.
great. Like, I mean, everything about it, right? Everything about it is just over the top. It's insane. It has gore. It has a fun story. It has nonstop action. You have just
It has a sequel.
right. It has a sequel that this was actually released as a. No, never mind.
Yeah, you're talking about the German thing,
the
right?
German thing. So this movie was originally banned in Germany. So what happened was they saw the success of this in other countries. So when Demons 2 came out, it came out in Germany as Demons 1, and then they released Demons 1 as Demons 2 just to recapitalize off of it. So you know, that's pretty weird, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of like once you start getting into these kind of films, like more
Well, sort of like it's sort of like Zombie, right?
underground films. There's a lot, like there's a lot of different names or different marketing strategies, or well, this was banned, and then when it was unbanned, it was released as something different, or maybe they changed the name for legal issues or whatever.
Well, Zombie
Like, I
was
know-
originally released as Zombie 2, and that's because it was trying to ride off the coattails of Night of the Living Dead, right? People were trying to say it was a sequel to
Yeah.
Night of the Living Dead, and I don't think Fulci ever liked that idea that it was marketed that way, right? Because it was his movie, Zombie, and they were trying to market it like it's Night of the Living Dead sequel. So that's why you see Zombie 2 all over the place, even though it does have, I guess, like unofficial sequels, right? Out there, but
Yeah, there's once you start digging into like little factoids about any kind of horror, not even just Italian. There's like crazy stuff that you'll find out. So those are, I guess it's gonna wrap up our favorite picks for Italian horror. We could go on for hours and hours, but before we get into some listener questions, I just want to throw out a couple names of some other films. They're not excluded from the rest of the discussion for any reason other than we're trying to not make this episode like 10 hours long. So Inferno, another Argento film.
amazing.
It's amazing. It is the sequel in a way to Suspiria. It's not like a direct kind of sequel, but he does have a little trilogy. I forgot what it's called. It's like the Three Mothers or something like that. But Inferno is the second in that. And then The Beyond by Fulci. So Fulci has his own trilogy as well. It's the Gates of Hell, or the Seven Gates of Hell trilogy. And so you've got first in that would be City of the Living Dead, and then you have The Beyond, and then what was the third? The House by the Cemetery, right? So that whole trilogy is good, but The Beyond is my favorite from that.
See, my favorite City of the Living Dead from those.
Yeah, well, City of the Living Dead is good, and then to talk about that briefly, like that does have one of the coolest death scenes, in my opinion, of any Italian horror film, or any Fulci film at least, where the priest, like the couple's like making out, and then the priest like just stares the girl down, and she pukes up her own intestines and stuff. It's pretty gnarly. And then I know we've talked a lot about Fulci's other films that are like gore, but if you want to see some Fulci giallo, like pure giallo, Don't Torture a Duckling. And then we didn't talk about any Mario Bava, but Blood and Black Lace. So, you have any other notables?
Just real quick, I would say please take the time to watch one of the weirdest Italian horror movies, and that is The New York Ripper. That one you guys have to watch just to see. It's a lot of fun. It's just really weird, and like I said, City of the Dead. Fulci is fucking phenomenal too. But yeah, I think for me that about wraps it up. I mean, there's all kinds of fun ones from other writer, directors, and filmmakers, but these are our collective favorites.
And it is that time of night, ladies and gentlemen. It is Sleaze Mail time. So, Andrew, why don't you read us off our first listener question?
All right, so our first question, Justin, we actually have two really good questions from the same person, and we have 3 questions total tonight. So we're going to answer the 2 from the same person and then 1 from the other guy here. So a certain Katie Wilson asks, her first question is, what do you guys think is the biggest changes in horror over the decades, starting with earliest in the 1920s to the year 2020? So I'll let you have a
100 years of horror.
I'll let you have a bat at that one.
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I could go into this,
What is the
early films. To me, this is not even just horror, but filmmaking in general. The first thing that comes to mind is, back in the day, films used to be, it was almost like stage plays. With a lot of lockdown cameras and just straight on, like you were like the view of the audience, or from the view of the audience. And then as, filmmaking progressed, there's a lot more. That's when things started to branch off to be more genre specific, like with camera movements and lighting and stuff like that. So I don't know. I feel like, if you go back and watch films like the original Universal films, or even like go all the way back to Nosferatu. It was like, it was like watching a play, right? And then you move on, some of that kind of carried into like the 50s and the 60s, and then you had people like Hitchcock who started innovating with like camera movement. And then moving on into the 70s and 80s, and now you're adding more visual elements, not necessarily gore, but just more than just relying on camera movement. So the camera movement, though, for me is, I think, the biggest. Camera and lighting. It moved from just being more static stuff to a lot more expression with the way the camera moves and stuff like that.
Right. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think as horror has developed and as filmmaking in general has developed, um, I think with I think what it's done is it's given filmmakers a better way to deliver those emotions. So back in the day, you didn't have dedicated, horror makeup artists or dedicated horror, composers or dedicated. I mean, they may have mostly worked in horror, but I think you had so few actual industry professionals. I'm talking about early on, right? That you didn't have these people that were just dedicating all of their time, all of their entire trade was horror. So I think nowadays when you can survive solely off of just doing horror films, you sharpen your tools over the course of time, so to speak, right? So like you said, not only is it going to make a difference in camera movements and in lighting? It's also going to make a difference in storytelling. It's going to make a difference in acting, because now you have people that are only in horror films, right? That only act in horror films, or you have your horror directors, your horror writers. Back then, it could have been like, okay, well, I'm writing a sci-fi piece. This year, my next year, maybe like something horror related or something suspense related. But now it's like, like Robert Eggers, he's a horror writer, director, right? Or, like Ari Aster, or, we can go on, like Jordan Peele, he's only doing like horror films, right? You're not going to see, I mean, well, maybe you will. I mean, I guess Jordan Peele does Key and Peele, so I guess I just kind of contradicted myself. But, like...
Yeah, but as far as his like actual films, he's doing more like thriller, suspense,
but what I'm
horror, darker stuff.
Right, but what I'm getting at now we're allowed to have those subgenres and those niches to where people are able to sharpen their skills. And the biggest change, I think, is that, right? I think it's the widespread of filmmaking in general has allowed us to have these little instead of us just being a fan of the movies, we can be just a fan of action or just a fan of horror, or just a fan of comedy. And then you have those communities built in with each one, which kind of fuels the change.
I agree with that. So,
okay.
Next part of the question.
I've got it for you right here. So this is asking you, what is your favorite horror decade and why?
I got to go with the 80s, man. Like, I love all horror. Like, well, not all, like, but you know what I mean? Like, there are films that I absolutely admire through and through from every decade and era of horror. But to me, the 80s, well, for one, when I was a kid, I remember going to the video store. I feel for some of you kids nowadays because you'll never experience that. But going to the video store and picking out a horror film, whether it was a slasher or a supernatural or thriller film or whatever, from the 80s, it was just iconic. The coolest cover art, over-the-top stories like we've already talked about, your characters that are just, pop culture icons now. So, yeah, for me, it's the 80s, man.
So even though your favorite movie came out in the late 70s?
Listen, 78, but then the whole franchise was ushered in the 80s. Like, I love the 70s too, and the late 70s had a lot of good films, but I mean, and I'm not saying like the 80s had the best films out of any genre.
It sounds like you're retracting your answer right now. Is what it sounds like.
No, I'm not, and I will still defend my answer. So I'm not saying that the 80s had like the all the films that came out in the 80s were better than any other horror film that ever came out. I'm just saying, to me,
So what exactly are you
that
saying, Justin?
well, it's okay, it's part nostalgia, but it's also a lot of my favorite films, period, and favorite being completely subjective, not that they're objectively better films. But the 80s are just, you've got Michael Myers, who technically, yes, 1978, but then, Halloween 2 and on through the rest of the good films in the franchise came out in the 80s. Friday the 13th, you had your Nightmare on Elm Street, you had Child's Play, Pumpkinhead, Hellraiser, all of these films. And that to me is just the most iconic era, just from being a kid and going and picking out these films. It's what got me into horror. So the 80s horror films are, I guess you'd say, where my roots are. So that's why it's the biggest for me.
Okay. Sounds like a good answer. Sounds like you defended your piece. You gave us an appropriate why. Now that I'm done busting your balls, mine is also the 80s. Now
I would have known, like, you weren't fooling me.
right. So the reason mine is the 80s is basically what Justin said. I mean, that was when I think horror storytelling, horror filmmaking, and the budget for horror was all coalescing at the right time, right? Because you had all your people that were interested in horror, so there was a demand for it. You had a good supply for it, because they were turning out horror movies every other freaking week, and the budget was there, right? They were just feeding these people money, and we got a lot of original horrors at that time, stuff that we're now trying to remake. So like Justin said, you had stuff like Lost Boys, The Shining, Cannibal Holocaust, The Thing, most of the Halloween movies, the Friday the 13th movies, Basket Case, Brain Damage. I mean, we could go on and on. Chopping Mall, Evil Dead, right? Like, you could go on and on. Creep Show. Like, you had so many amazing movies. The best, well, not the best vampire, the second best vampire movie, Fright Night. You even had some of those giallos that we talked about.
That's my favorite.
Well, that's your favorite. Mine's Lost Boys, but we'll have to have a vampire episode soon. So, we even have some of our favorite horrors that we talked about in the giallo franchise, like Inferno and Demons 2 and what was the other?
Even the werewolves.
Yeah.
The Howling.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much good shit that came out in the 80s, but a turning point for me for horror, Justin, like, that's my favorite decade, but the turning point for me was the teen screams of the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when I really decided that I wanted to have a career in horror, or I really became obsessed with it, right? Because that's when I was at the right time, and I started seeing stuff like Scream, and started seeing stuff like The Faculty, and I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Urban Legend.
Shit like that, right? So that was really a big turning point for me. But after I realized that horror is what I loved, then I went back and started researching it more. And then that's when I really got into 80s horror, because I had seen stuff like, Halloween, before I had probably seen I Know What You Did Last Summer and all that. And of course, I was raised up on Nightmare on Elm Street and that kind of shit. But I wasn't familiar with how much horror was rubbing elbows with those movies, right? I thought, okay, well, this is just a weird movie as a kid. This is just a weird movie, right? And I liked them, especially Nightmare on Elm Street, because Robert Englund's hilarious as Freddy Krueger. Even as a kid, you're like, this guy's freaking, this is like a weird uncle, right? But then when you go back and watch it, you're like, oh God, there's so much good shit from that time period, like, why didn't anybody show me, Chopping Mall as a kid?
Sleepaway Camp.
Right. Why didn't anybody show me Sleepaway Camp as a kid? Or it's just so much good shit. But great questions, Justin. The last question, and I guess where we need to wrap it up at, is Halloween Kills. This comes from an Alex Meropoulos, and he asks us, what are our thoughts on Halloween Kills in general? What do you think?
Ready for this shit?
Yes, same.
Okay, because here's what I'm gonna go with this. So, Halloween, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I'll say it till I die. The original 1978 Halloween is my all-time favorite film and horror film. It's what sparked the filmmaker in me. And I will be the first to admit that after the second one, that shit got bonkers. Like, there's so many different storylines. Like, you've got the cult curse thing, and then you've got his sister moves away and is what is she, a headmaster of a school? And then you've got we're not going to talk about them, the remakes.
You got Busta Rhymes, roundhouse
Busta
kicking
Rhymes,
Michael
yep.
Myers. I'm sick of all these
But-
Michael Myers in my motherfucking haunted house.
Yeah, but I'm really loving what they've done with bringing this back and making it direct sequels. So, or this is a direct sequel to the 1978 film. So, and then of course Halloween Kills. At first I was kind of like, they were supposed to end it after the last one, the 2018, but I was so impressed with where they went with that. It's not like the best film of all time and that sort of thing, but as a Halloween film, I think that's the sequel that the original deserved. I do love the original sequel. The first Halloween 2 is probably the scariest of the 80s Halloweens ever. But Halloween 2018, I love the direction, love the writing, cinematography. So I'm excited for Halloween Kills. I want to see where they go with this.
Okay, my quick take on this, guys, is I am super stoked as well for Halloween Kills. Big fan of the original Halloween 2. Big fan, of course, of the original Halloween. I mean, most horror people are. It is not my favorite horror movie, but it is definitely up there in the top 3.
It's okay to be wrong.
It's okay for you to also have subpar taste in your number 1 movie. But
Whoa. Continue.
Halloween is great. Michael Myers is great. I liked the 2018 Halloween film. I expected more from it, to be completely honest with you. But
I did too.
But that's because my favorite Halloween movie, and I'm expecting a lot from this one, right? Halloween Kills, because my favorite Halloween movie is Halloween 2. I just think it really had the correct budget for the story, because I believe the original Halloween obviously was shot sort of on a micro budget, a low budget, and or what was considered a low budget at the time. And it was still a fucking phenomenal movie, but I think the second one really, the story was better, and I think that the acting was better overall, because, your people like Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance and all them, they've got to settle in those roles and really understand the characters. Also, the budget was bigger, so the story was better. It was a better movie in my opinion. Also, it had cooler kills. 2018 Halloween is fucking phenomenal, but I expected more from it. I wasn't disappointed, but I wasn't sexually aroused from it. And Halloween Kills is gonna be awesome. I mean, because we're getting the OG Nick Castle in 2 more movies. We're getting Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, and those 2 back again together. You couldn't ask for more in 2020. And Justin, we have to see this together. So
I'm down.
Other than that, guys, Halloween Kills is gonna be sick, and don't at me if you say otherwise.
Yeah, so that's actually going to wrap it up for us, guys. So, check us out on Twitter, at Cinema Creep Pod, also at Black Mass Films on Instagram and Twitter. I am HorrorDad13 on Instagram and Twitter, and you can find Andrew at Drewcifer, but it's Drew X Cipher on all social media platforms. So, that's going to be it for us, guys. Thanks for checking out this episode, and we will see you guys next week.
See ya.